Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Celine, and today I thought we would have a little celebration because I reached 500 subscribers, which is really wonderful. So thank you all for being here, for pressing that button, for actually being interested in my videos. I'm really grateful, and I'm so glad that you're all here. I thought it would be really fun to do a little Q&A, so I put up a community post and I let people ask me questions and I will be answering the questions. And I got quite a bunch of different questions and a lot of them were quite challenging ones. So very exciting. I hope you enjoy this video. I also wanted to let you all know that I have made a Patreon for my channel. Patreon is a platform where people can support creators like, for example, people who make YouTube videos like me, and you will get some cool perks in return. So if you decide to join my Patreon, you'll be able to get early access to my videos. I usually finish them at least a day in advance, but sometimes if I'm like on top of things, it'll be about a week in advance, and you'll be able to watch the video before other people can. And you also get a say in the books I read, so there is a poll at the moment for a book that I will read in November, and I will also make a video about this book. The choices are The Idiot by Dostoevsky, Paradise Lost by John Milton, War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, and Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. So if you would like to have a say in what books I read and what videos I make, please do have a look at my Patreon. I'm currently saving up for a new camera, or just a camera. I actually film on my phone and it's not ideal. You can rest assured that any money coming in from Patreon is going directly into making better videos and possibly even more videos. So Baskin the Story says, congratulations on 500 subscribers. Thank you very much. What was your favourite childhood book and what is your favourite book now? In terms of my favourite childhood book, my absolute favourite that I kept borrowing from the library is Matilda by Roald Dahl. I absolutely adored this book. This is not my childhood copy. I read it in Dutch, which is my native language. I loved Matilda. In hindsight, I can really see why this book appealed to me. I too was a tiny bookish girl who just really wanted to read and basically just live in the library. So I think that really appealed to me. I also was slightly obsessed with the idea of moving things with my mind, partially because I'd seen Star Wars, which, I mean, the Force is basically moving shit with your mind as well. Matilda does the same, and honestly, I wanted to be able to do that. I wanted to be able to just move things. And honestly, this book still has a soft spot in my heart, and I do still sometimes reread it because honestly, it's wonderful. The second part of the question was, what is your favourite book now? And I'm not sure I have one. I get so excited about all of the books, and I read all of the books, and I don't reread that much. I have started doing that a little bit more, but that also means that, you know, my favourite book is constantly being supplanted by a different book. So I would say I probably don't have a single favourite book where I'm like, this is it. This is the book that, you know, if I'm going to be cast off onto a deserted island, this is the book I would take. I don't really have that. I would say that the author I'm most obsessed with at the moment is Virginia Woolf, because I'm just really into her non-fiction mainly. Although I did read Orlando recently, which I also really loved. So possibly my favourite author of the moment is Virginia Woolf, but I'm sure that will change within a month or something like that. The Grey asks, will you do a review of Wise Blood by Flannery O'Connor? I don't have this book. I don't own it. So probably not anytime soon, but I'm happy to add it to my pile of to read books. If it's really good, or if you're like, you would really enjoy this, feel free to tell me in the comments and I will try to bump it up in my list of books that I want to read. Batina writes, hi Celine, congratulations. I have some questions. What's your job? What was the first classic you love? And what made you start a YouTube channel? Thank you. So 3 questions there. First of all, what's your job? At the moment, I work in education, but I have 3 job interviews lined up for the next 2 weeks. So honestly, I can't tell you what my job will be in a month or so. So TBD. The second part of the question was, which was the first classic you loved? I think the first classic I read was Frankenstein, but in an adapted version. I think I read it when I was like 9. I vaguely remember getting it from the library. I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it. I think the first classic that I really, really loved is Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. There's just something so playful, so fun, so wild and ridiculous about Alice in Wonderland. When I was reading it, I was constantly wondering whether Lewis Carroll was under the influence of something, because it's just so weird and ridiculous, and it's such a wild ride. But it made me realise that classics can be fun, which is a rather silly realisation. In hindsight, I'm like, well, yes, of course classics can be fun. But at that time, I didn't really know that. Classics have this connotation of being dusty and boring. Well, I did not find Alice in Wonderland dusty or boring whatsoever, and I think this was definitely one of the gateway books for me to explore more classics. Then the third part of the question was, what made you start a YouTube channel? Honestly, I just wanted to talk about books. I love books. I want to share books. I just enjoyed the whole process of reading books, discussing books, just anything with books. And I figured, rather than boring all the people in my life who do read books, but not to the extent that I do, so rather than talking to them constantly about the various things that I've read, I decided to maybe find my community online in the shape of a YouTube channel, and I've been really enjoying the process so far. Speaking of YouTube channel things, Giant Cup of Coffee says, congratulations, this might sound weird, but do you have any strategies for hitting 500 so quickly? Were there certain video topics, hauls, TBRs that seem to bring in more people? This is a very interesting question, and on one hand I would say, yes, there were some things that I did that I think helped me, but largely, honestly, it has to do a lot with luck. There are certain things that you can do when you have a YouTube channel to make the YouTube algorithm like you and like your channel. One of the things that the algorithm likes is consistency, as well as posting multiple times a week. So I've definitely noticed that if I post 2 videos a week, I actually get a lot more views on every single video than I do when I post 1 video a week. So when I first started my YouTube channel, I made sure to basically get a couple of videos out in rather rapid succession, because I knew that would boost me in the algorithm. But ultimately, there is just an aspect of luck, in the sense that the right people have to find your video and they just have to run into it, basically. So you do things to make it more appealing to people. So I try to make nice thumbnails and make the thumbnail representative of the video that people will actually get. But that doesn't necessarily mean that your video will reach the right audience. When I look in my analytics, I sometimes see that my videos were recommended on some really, really weird other videos that have absolutely nothing to do with books. So I think YouTube basically has to learn what your videos are actually about, and I don't really have any additional insight in how that actually happens. I do think it also helps if you have a rather clear vision of what your channel is. So even though I have many, many interests, I try to keep my channel sort of within the lane of literature and with a focus on classics. I think if I started posting all kinds of different things, that would just confuse everything and wouldn't really help me. In terms of different types of videos that do well, I've noticed that videos that have a broad range of books talked about do better than videos that are specifically about, you know, one author or one group of books. And I think it's mainly because people see the thumbnail, see that there's going to be multiple books, but you don't really know what books are going to be in that video. So it basically captures everyone who has a vague interest in books around a certain topic, or honestly just anything. You know, if I post a wrap up, sometimes you don't really know what's going to be in that video. So I've noticed that videos about a broader group of books do better, which is a bit of a shame, because I quite enjoy doing videos just about one book or about 2 books, or, you know, a very specific topic. I really enjoy that, but I know that less people click on those videos. I think overall book hauls probably perform best, at least for me. But I also don't think it's feasible to just post book hauls, even though I would love to just be buying books all the time, but that's not really how it works. So, you know. Emerson writes, kudos on the channel milestone. What book did you expect not to like, but not only captivated you, but ended up challenging some preconceived notions about the type of literature you appreciate, even love? This is a wonderful question, and I really had to have a bit of a think about what book would be a good one. And One of the books that I think really changed my mind about a big group of literature was this book by Louis Couperus. In Dutch it's called the Stille Kracht, but in English it would be, I think, Hidden Force or Hidden Power or something like that. It's not really a book that is translated widely, I think. This is a 19th century classic of Dutch literature. And if I'm really honest, because of the way we had to read literature in secondary school, I detested Dutch literature, very specifically. I enjoyed English literature and I enjoyed reading books for English. I did not enjoy reading books for Dutch. And I had this idea that Dutch literature was basically just about white middle-aged men having a midlife crisis and sleeping with younger women. Now, to be fair, this is a part of literary fiction, or at least a group of books in literary fiction that I am not into. But it's not that's not limited to the Netherlands. I've also seen books like that in French literature as well as in English literature, to be honest. And for some reason I picked up this book a bit on a whim because I have enjoyed so much 19th century literature in English literature. You know, I really enjoy Dickens. I really enjoy those types of books, but I thought about just having that gap in my knowledge of Dutch literature and that felt kind of weird. So I tried this. Absolutely loved it, and it completely changed my perception of Dutch literature and its literary history. I actually thought this was a beautiful book, and it deals with some really sensitive topics in a very interesting way. The Netherlands colonized Indonesia, and this is one of the books that it critiques colonization, but in a really subtle and intricate way that I really loved this. The characterization was wonderful. I also really loved that, you know, considering how old the book is, just how sensitive Couperus is to the plights of women in these contexts. And honestly, this was definitely a book that just opened up a whole new world for me. So I actually quite enjoy reading Dutch literature and Dutch classics as well. Oops. I've also been slowly getting into poetry, but I can't quite point to one specific book that changed my mind about poetry. So that's a slightly more, it's been more of a gradual process, I think. The next question is from GMS and it says, "Hi Celine, congratulations on your 500 subscribers, thank you. Tell us a little bit about your studies and 2 or 3 books that influenced you the most. Warm greetings from Greece." So in terms of my studies, I did a bachelor's degree in humanities. It was quite a broad degree. So I did courses on religious studies, philosophy, literature, all kinds of stuff. Then I did a master's degree in history. So I went quite specific onto literary history and cultural history. And then I finally did a PhD, which was, again, literary history specifically, mainly focused on the 1840s, and I was looking at working class literature in England, basically published in London, to be fair. One class that I took in my bachelor's degree that I think really set me up basically for this entire journey that overall took about 9 years was this class about cultural history that I took in my bachelor's degree, and it was a 3-part class, and it started from basically the Middle Ages and went all the way up to, I think, the 1950s. And during that class, which took a year and a half because it was 3 semesters worth, we read basically through literary history of Europe. So for this class, we read things like the Lays of Marie de France, we read Don Quixote, we read Dickens, we even read a bit of James Joyce. I admit I didn't actually finish Ulysses, but I did read parts of it, maybe that counts. And I think seeing more of literary history and seeing more about the development of literature over time and also seeing the literature of various places, I think that really inspired me, and it really inspired me to read a lot more broadly than I had done up until that point. Also, just from an academic perspective, it led me to being able to do my own research in a very specific topic. And I feel like all of those little crumbs and like my master's degree, etc., basically all led me to my PhD thesis. In terms of books that have really influenced me generally, so not just within my studies, but more broadly, I would say one of the books that really made me think differently about creative processes and writing, I would say On Writing by Stephen King was quite a large influence on me. I've reread this book, I think about 3 times now, and every time I still find just something inspiring or something new in it. And this is a book that combines a memoir of Stephen King's life, basically, as well as just pretty nitty-gritty writing advice. And I found this book really helpful in my own creative processes. And I also think sometimes you just need a kick in the butt. And I think Stephen King is really good at providing that. Even though, you know, the book has gotten a little bit dated, because I think it's about 20 years old by now. So sure, take his advice with a grain of salt, but I always feel quite inspired when I read this book. One of the books that really has influenced the way I think about storytelling is Lord of the Rings. I know a lot of people are really focused on the world building Tolkien did and, you know, the various parts of just this vast world that he's created. But I think what I take away from Lord of the Rings is just the heart of the story and the heart of the characters. To me, it's much more about the journey that the characters are on and the way that that's described and the way that emotion is used within the story of Lord of the Rings that I find so interesting. And it has really changed my perspective on how I see stories. I honestly think about the story of Lord of the Rings way more than you would expect. And then finally we have Anita, who says, "Hello Celine, congratulations on your 500 subscribers. Hope you grow more." Thank you. "Would you like to tell us about your experience of books that you had read because of academics and about the books you love? I mean your experience of literature in academic life and as a hobby. Really love your videos. Thank you." This is such an interesting question. I think the relationship between loving literature just as a hobby as well as loving literature but while being in academia, it's a balance that you have to strike. There is some sort of balance that you have to take because reading basically becomes work. I mean, as a PhD student, to me, reading was literally just my job. I was being paid to research books, and that really took away some of the joy for me. I think especially because in a PhD, my subject was so narrow, so specific, and so really laser focused on one decade basically, that I didn't have much choice. And I basically just had to read these books. There was no maybe you can or maybe you should include this. It was literally just, this is it. This is what you have to read. And I don't really do well within those really structured confines. I'm really someone who just likes to explore and who likes to try different things. So I think during my PhD, I found that balance really difficult. I would say during my bachelor's and master's degrees, it was a lot easier because I actually had a fair amount of freedom in terms of the assignments that I got. So often I was allowed to just choose whatever book I wanted to write about, or basically pick my own subject within the confines of one topic, and therefore not having to really be laser focused on this one very specific thing made me feel a lot less like reading was a chore that I just had to do for work. On the flip side, I do think that researching literature has just immensely improved my appreciation of all the things that literature can do, all of the aspects that go into it. I particularly really love and I'm really interested in how literature both reflects back onto the society that it was written in, as well as sort of creating the society at the same time. Like there's this back and forth between creative work and the society in which it is created that I find absolutely fascinating. And that is something that I do not tire of and will gladly read more about and explore more about just indefinitely, I think. Another thing that I think is really fun about being in academia is that there are certain authors that are the greats, Dickens, that sort of thing. You know, everyone knows Dickens, plenty of people research Dickens, fine. But there are so many books that are really obscure, but you will meet people at conferences who are studying these books and who have really, really interesting things to say about those books. And I think that was one of the things about academia that I really, really enjoyed, to just basically have people tell me interesting things that I would have never found out by myself. And there are plenty of books that I had to read for academic purposes, you know, through my entire academic journey that have become favorites. So for example, I read A Tale of Two Cities for my bachelor's degree, loved it. Great book. I also read during my PhD, for example, The Corsair by Lord Byron. I'd never read any Byron before. I sort of had it in my head that Byron would be really pretentious and convoluted and difficult to understand, so I was really pleasantly surprised to read The Corsair, which is an epic poem, but is very easy to understand. It flows really well, and I really enjoyed my time with this. I think overall it was a bit of a mixed experience. Sometimes I struggled to find the right balance between fun and duty, but overall I really feel like just my appreciation of literature in all of its many forms has actually increased because of my time in academia. So I certainly don't regret any part of it. Those were all the questions. Thank you so much for everyone who gave me a question, and you all had like really thoughtful, really interesting questions, and I really had to think about some of them, so thank you for that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Also, if you are interested in my Patreon, please do have a look at it. I put the link in the description below, and you do get to vote on what book I read in November, so, you know, I hope to see you again soon. Bye!